Brothers and sisters, misses and misters, do-gooders and childhooders, the Dented Cast is in cyberspace coming to you. My name is Dobie Maxwell, flanked by my Blaze Orange partner, Max Baumgartner. Today we are in Wisconsin. You wore the Blaze Orange for Wisconsin purposes?
I did. Wisconsin, to me, is Blaze Orange, man. You know, I'm in my mind in Illinois. I'm a fib, right? And so in my mind, when you come to Wisconsin, you need to be seen. So I'm being seen.
We're being seen. 4932 North 20th Street is the place we are recording this episode. It doesn't mean anything to you, but to me, this is the place I grew up. It's my childhood home. My grandparents owned this house. I moved here when I was 5 months old. My grandpa was going to put me in an adoption up for foster care, and he said, you know what, you had a pretty rough start. I didn't know where they were going to send you, so I had to bring you here. And it's amazing to me, surreal. We went to Max's hometown a little while back, and it was a whole different experience for you. What was going through your head when you saw your childhood place of existence?
Well, I mean, you can go ahead and watch that episode, and that's just part of where I spent my time. But this is about you. This isn't about me today. This is about you. What does this house represent to you?
Well, it represented a lot of pain, and that's the reason. The whole idea of this show is to come to a place where we can talk about painful things, hopefully in a safe place. A lot of pain, a lot of things went on in that house that are still in my heart today. And to look at it now, it is funny to me because my grandmother was very German, and we had a lady that lived next door over there, Mamie. Her name was Mamie Guzzi. That was her name, and my grandmother and her hated each other. I remember as a little kid shouting matches back and forth. Oh my gosh, if the ball would go over in Mrs. Guzzi's yard, heaven help us, because she would yell and scream and get off my lawn, and it was manicured lawn. I mean, if they're going to take a lawn and put it on the cover of Better Homes and Gardens, it would be her lawn over there. And my grandma always had to keep up with her, so I, as soon as I could cut grass, was out here cutting the grass every third day. Now it pretty much looks like a jungle, which is fine, and the people inside, they have their own lives and their own family. And the point of this whole thing, which I wanted to do an episode here, is the pain that is in us from childhood is in us alone. It's completely changed. Those people have no idea or didn't care that anybody else lived here. They got their own lives, their own family. And as I come here all these years later, nothing matters anymore. You know, those painful things that I have a hard time letting go of. I took a lot of beatings in that house. I mean, my grandma was nasty until I got to the point where I was big enough it didn't hurt anymore. But there was a long time I was afraid of her. She'd whip me with wooden spoon, whatever she had to do. And it's like, that really was intimidating back then. And it looked so much bigger then. This yard was a huge yard, and we played sports in the back and across the street. And Maxie grew up in public housing. Well, you can look over. We'll maybe take a little picture of it. There's public housing a block away where I met my best friend Timbo and his family as we were kids. And he ended up robbing a bank later. We'll go to the place where he robbed the bank. And all these vivid memories are in my head, and in my head only. And nobody else knows. Nobody else cares. It's just gone. And I was telling Max, there's a house across the street where a lady lived that was friends with my grandma, and she that place was horrible. The house was decrepit, and she had a huge garden in the yard, and she would grow vegetables I couldn't stand: kohlrabi, zucchini, rutabaga. Bring them over by literally the bushels, and I would have to eat them against my will, because God forbid anybody that grew up in the Depression would throw food away. And I'd scream and yell, why do I have to mow the lawn, and we have to get the weeds? Every weed had to be taken out of the sidewalk. Now you can lose yourself in all the weeds on the sidewalk out there, and it's like they don't care. That's fine. I didn't care back then either, but it's like, oh my God, you have to do that. What will the neighbors think? Well, the neighbors are all dead. They're not thinking anything like that. It flashes into my mind. So hopefully, if you go back and you face the place where you grew up and you had all these memories in your head that are still flaming and still get you down on a certain day when you think of the right thing, or a certain smell comes in your nose, or a certain sound comes in your ear, and it doesn't matter. It's over. And I know that's a logical way to think about it, but it's harder to do sometimes. I had a hard time letting it go, but coming here was a good thing, very therapeutic for me.
Let me ask you a couple questions. So first of all, I'm here in 2021. You would have been here in the 70s?
Yes, I came here August, is almost to the date, 1963. I was born in 63.
Because even today, this looks pretty nice. This is a nice place, man. It's suburban. It's a big city in America. This is a pretty nice place. This isn't bad, you know?
No, it's not necessarily bad, but a lot of just the bad things happen here. You know, there's a lot of coldness in here, a lot of ice, mean-spirited things. And as a little kid, you can't sort it out. You don't have anything else to compare it to. You're thinking this is the way life is. You think everybody lives in fear. Everybody gets beaten. And it's like it's not that way at all, but you think it is.
That's because the problems are in your head. They're in your head and they live in your head. You just said that, the memories of this house live in your head, but this house has different memories now, and hopefully they're not all bad for the people who live here,
Hopefully it's good. We're going to talk to the nice lady. I knocked on the door and asked permission. She couldn't have been any nicer or friendlier. Hopefully we'll talk to her and she'll have some insight on all this. But we're all people and we all have our own individual destiny, I think. And sometimes we put too much, I know I'll be the first one to say I'm guilty of it, putting too much emphasis on things that just aren't there anymore. But God, they're in my head still.
Did your dad and his brother grow up in this house?
They did for a little while. My grandparents grew up, or they had a house about 3 or 4 blocks south of here, and they moved here. And my grandparents always told me that they got this lot. It's a double lot, and the city was trying to get. It was a separate city called North Milwaukee at the time, and my grandfather changed his name to my grandmother's stepfather's last name because he had girls, and he gave my grandmother, I think it was $5,000 or $10,000 in 1935 to change his name. And my grandpa's quote was, "I would have changed my name to shit on rye for that kind of money back then." And he used that money to buy this particular house, and he wanted to have a nice house that he didn't have, and my grandmother always wanted a home. So they picked some place where nobody lived, and they started over, and there was no other houses in this whole thing. And he said, we watched all other families grow the houses here over time. So this is a big deal for them back then. They spent their whole inheritance, their whole money. They wanted to build a life here. So my father and my uncle did live here for a little while. It's a tiny little house. There's 2 bedrooms in there. Most things happen in the basement. I don't know if you grew up in a situation like that, but most people that grew up in the Depression, they didn't want to have their nice things. My grandma called them her pretties, all her furniture that she never sat in, and it had all the plastic all over it. I somehow think the people in there don't have plastic on their furniture anymore. And we couldn't sit on anything, so everything went on in the basement. I remember coming home when Elvis died, right around this time of year, playing baseball, and went in the basement, and Grandma was cooking dinner, and on a little black and white TV, the death of Elvis Presley. And it's amazing how Elvis, he's young, how did he die? And those memories like that are in us. That's the whole point of this. I know I'm babbling and rambling on, but memories get in our head, good and bad, and they stay there. And it's up to us to tweak the importance of them. God, that's hard.
Well, you made a couple of good points here, okay? And I don't even know if you made them.
Probably not.
Okay? But the good points are, number one, the pain lives in your head. And that's for all of us dented cans. The pain is in your head. What you're feeling is not out in the world. And so when people look at you, when you're in pain, you carry that around with you all the time. They get to see the effects of the pain without seeing the pain. So you're judged on that all the time.
Yeah, amen. Good. But I think if you can, maybe it's not as big to you. Maybe it is. Where you grew up, maybe it's a town that's not even where you live anymore. Go back, look at it from adult eyes, and I think it'll really change your perspective and help. And it was Max's idea to go to his hometown, and he said, we'll go to yours too eventually. And I learned from going to your hometown. Hopefully you can learn from coming to mine. And it looks good to you from the outside because you didn't see it at the time. And I looked at your place, the same thing. So, again, if you can untweak the tangled wires in any of our heads, that's why we exist.
Well, the reason I asked if your dad and his brother grew up here was a pointed question, but then you took it and ran down the highway, 5 exits. But the pointed question that I had for you is, we talk a lot about how much you don't like your dad and you cannot forgive your dad, but I still maintain, without only knowing what you've told me, I still maintain that the reason he was a dented can and a dark soul was because of how his own mother treated him.
Could very well be. I'm sure she beat the shit out of him too. She was not discriminatory. It was not just me. She had a lot of anger and rage in her. Why? I don't know. So she passed it down to him. He passed it down to me, but I didn't pass it down to anyone else. I never mercilessly beat anyone else. I might have other faults, but not that.
It's coming. Me, right? We're gonna take a break here, and Dobie is going to interview the current resident of the house that he spent some time in as a kid. Give us just a second.